will you contact me this guy, and then we could be in a three-way. You know, I can't sit in front of this all day.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the radio station ownership. I cannot open the NewsQuest PLC page that gets us into CEO Davidson's business interests. CEO Davidson looks like a relatively innocent chap to me because none of his companies have been crashed. If you look at the directors that are on the lists around him, all of the companies get crashed eventually.
Yeah, but like I said to you, if people spend the time doing the groundwork, the legwork, the Bobby on the beat work, and start to dismantle, like I've tried to show to you, how you can use very basic search engines like Direct to Check, companies in the UK, and use those to understand the mechanics of billion-pound organised crime and money laundering. Now, when you look at radio stations...
So the radio, yeah, tell me about the ownership of radio stations and what would shock me when you were going to say that a few minutes ago.
I'm telling you that when you check, if you spend the time and check some of the directors and see what directorships they have, you would be dumbstruck to see how many radio stations they control in the whole country.
Give me some names, so I can be...
I'm not going to give you some names because I haven't got my file out. But so if I told you that certain directors are directors of 80 to 90 radio stations, that shows they have total control about the input to those radio stations.
Well, it's the same with...
They can filter whatever they want. And if they red flag your name, not one word of your expose or my expose will get beyond a brief interview.
How have you got
a red flag?
That sounds like a conspiracy theory from Gordon Bowden. Have you got evidence of that? Have you tried to raise issues and had them flattened that way?
Yes, I have. I went to BBC Radio Derby when I had an appointment with the producer, a lady, and that was because my son had contacted them to say that I have some amazing documents that led to people like Sir Mark Thatcher and ex-SAS commander Simon Mann, who were detained in the Equatorial Guinea coup d'etat. And when I went, it was initially to be a 10-minute basic overview of some of the documents which linked to Andrea Davison, the same network.
Yeah.
However, instead of 10 minutes, the producer of BBC Radio Derby, she sat dumbstruck when I showed her a couple of the documents and the contents, and she said, this is an amazing story. Well, it's my story. It's a story of a crusade of good over evil. But I can name names because they're on documents. And when you looked at what I told her and the context of what I told her about billion-pound fraud, theft and money laundering in the jewel of humanity, the United Kingdom, she then sent my details along with a brief overview to Panorama. And in her statement to her friend at Panorama, she said, I have interviewed people over the last 30 years, and this man, which was me, has such an amazing story that if 1% of what I have told her stands true and can be found to be factual, would make an epic film. Well, I told you, not just 1%, everything I said is forensically accurate and can be covered with documents.
God bless Gordon. Can I just put in my little local perspective so that we can name and shame the people that are gagging the truth about how the citizens of the world are being deceived by their politicians and the paymasters for these networks. We were talking about Murdoch earlier, but my local paper is called The Southern Reporter. The editor there is Susan Windram. I've made appointments to meet the woman. She refuses to honour them, like Michael Moore MP. They are based in the town of Selkirk, like Sir David Steele. You know, the man that we talked about in the
Yeah.
future of the Syrian fund, in all of the frauds involving the globalized Fleming family interests. That's Sir David Steele of Akewood, former head of the Lib Dems. He is a neighbour and a civic leader in the region where the Southern Reporter refused to publish any of my objective data on the sovereign debt crisis and how it had been engineered by world leaders. Remember, we talked about the Ewan Brown character, who's a bigwig at St Andrews University now, and his role in crashing the global banks. And we've talked about David Steele's role in multiple pan-continental frauds and violent campaigns in the geopolitical sector. The man is a criminal, and the paper is just a vent for births, marriages and deaths. It's owned by Johnson Press nationally, who own the Scotsman newspaper and the Yorkshire Post. Yet those are two of the financial epicentres for the fraud that we're talking about at 50 Lothian Road and at 1 Park Row.
Yet Talisman House, 163 Holborn Street in Aberdeen. No different. They're all interlocked.
Ashley Highfield is the chief executive at Johnson Press. All of their newspapers were on my email lists. All of my correspondence with all of the truths that we're revealing about how the citizens of the UK are being defrauded by their leaders and by their quisling media, they could have been privy to that. They chose to opt out and to gag the information, like Radio Borders, my local radio station. But I don't know much about the ownership of them at this stage, but by 4 o'clock this afternoon I will know everything there is to know. I know that the financial advisors that I visited this week, I'm in the process of being dispossessed of my own home. When I asked if I could remortgage my own home, they said at 57 that I would have to pay it all back within the time span of 7 years. There was
You could if you accessed your pension. Do you understand?
Yeah, I cannot access my pension because I'm threatened with legal action, and I've just uncovered in the last video that we made the legal basis for the money laundering cabals and real estate empires, which are just money laundering frauds, and the whole thing is ruthless. The news will come out online. It will not come out of Britain's free press, in inverted commas. Tell me a little bit more about the cases that you've taken forward through your local radio vents. Have you tried the local paper?
Yes, I took the...
So name the names. Let's give some shame to the director of your local paper.
The Derby Telegraph.
Yeah.
What happened was, when I downloaded the documents from Andrea Davison's webpage, there were over 400 documents, and personal politicians' letters to Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Lord Doug Hoyle, the real diadems of Labour, where she claimed that Arms to Iraq documents, that she worked for the Department of Trade and Industry Select Committee as their intelligence advisor. She was an Arms to Iraq investigator. She gave secret evidence to the Scott inquiry, and those letters and the 2-page document from which I recovered using the header bars, the 400 pages, because it involved the Derbyshire police who raided her property. That was 19 Derbyshire and North Wales police and a dog squad in her North Wales, raided her North Wales property. What happened was that because the Derbyshire police were involved, obviously there was an immediate interest with the Derby Telegraph. However, unbeknown to most people, Derbyshire is controlled by the Labour government. It's a Labour council, and that involved Chris Williamson, and right honourable.
That's Chris Williamson, the censorship expert.
Chris Williamson MP.
Yeah, the one who does not let any information out into Hansard unless it's something to do with women being kidnapped in.
the relationship extends far beyond that, because the other Derby's, Chris Williamson is Derby North, and his cohort leader is Margaret Beckett. Right Honourable, may I add, Right Honourable Margaret Beckett. Now, to put it in relationship to Andrea Davison and arms to Iraq, and being an intelligence advisor to the Select Committee of the Department of Trade and Industry, Miss Andrea Davison's documents show that Andrea Davison was in direct correspondence, albeit a long time ago, in the 1990s, with Tony Blair and Ken Clarke. And so there was an immediate red flag by Chris Williamson and Beckett into answering my questions I put to them, to relay in Parliament in a Q&A, why weren't the Derbyshire Police and the Foreign Office recovering Miss Davison to give testimony evidence in the Iraq inquiry, or to give further evidence relating to arms to Iraq. And
we've done a lot of the stuff on the actual crimes. I'm more interested in the ownership of your paper and how that gets up to the global masters.
Yeah, what you have to do is understand why certain stories never make headline press. Because
no, but the commercial ownership of the Derby paper. What is the Derby paper's name again?
The Derby Telegraph.
So who are the parent owners?
Well, I can go into it and get my files back. That wasn't the point, George. The point is that when you take a headline story, like two major politicians who refuse to take forward as a constituent the evidence that he is presented to them, to take to Parliament to get answers, that these people have a responsibility because they are public servants.
So too does David Dimbleby. What do you know about David Dimbleby's business interests?
Well, I haven't got, George, I don't go into every single person.
Because the Panorama thing is a cynical vein for everything evil that they do to the country.
Look, Panorama is an investigative section of the BBC.
It's a broadcasting event, what the BBC do to the people a year ahead of time. It is just false news in the extreme.
It's not, George, you cannot turn around and say everything that is presented is false news. You can't say it. You're not an expert on it. What you are...
You're telling me that everyone in the Parliament building is consumed by fraud.
No, I'm not saying everybody. Where have I said everybody?
Well, I believe that they are. Tell me an innocent parliamentarian.
Well, because I haven't looked at everybody. I've got something to do with my life other than just doing what we are doing at this very minute in time.
Okay.
I cannot focus my whole attention into...
But you don't know who owns the Derby Telegraph?
No. I cannot.
But you do know that it's unprepared to take anything on that you present to them that's of national significance.
Because it flies over the head of a normal reader to stick into a section or a few paragraphs in a broadsheet newspaper, where tomorrow morning that will be lying out covering up dog wee or dog poo, because that's yesterday's news. They don't look to continuing the delving into trillion-pound organised crime. They want continuous short stories which are...
If I told you that Johnston Press, who own the Scotsman, are in a massive billion-pound debt pool, would it surprise you in any way?
No, nothing surprises me, George.
And if I told you that Ashley Highfield, the CEO, who's a LinkedIn friend of mine, like many of the other people that keep an eye on us on LinkedIn, his mission in life is to get rid of hard print runs as soon as he possibly can. He's a former BBC executive from London. He's an expert in electronic news and the dispersion of globalised news from one call centre in either London or Manchester. Take your pick at the moment.
Yeah, because what they're trying to do is make or email or online newspapers to cut costs on.
Yeah,
on
and to cut jobs in the sector.
Yeah.
And what I finished off with John Patterson's interview yesterday, which they shut down for technological reasons at YouTube, is that if Alex Salmond were to take the Scotsman and to debunk it as the meaningless news rag that it is, the man Hastings at the top of that organisation is, you know, is just a propagandist. And what they need to do with the paper and the printer is to issue a currency for Scotland as an independent country, because none of the other countries across Europe or in England are prepared to share their currencies with Salmond because of the.
You already got your own Scottish currency. You've got a Scottish pound.
But Salmond wants to be independent and to be a slave to Her Royal Highness the Queen, who's the richest corporate owner on the globe, as you well know. You've taught me that.
George, yes, George. If you were Alex Salmond, if he was a genuine person to take Scotland into independency, all he would need to do is do a full disclosure on dismantling 50 Lothian Road and 163 Holborn Street, Talisman House.
And that's why his staff have stopped confirming receipt of my emails on those topics. But William Hague did not, so William Hague has had to step down. They are in a state of disarray, and all we need to do is keep explaining to the taxpayers and the victims and the investors and the savers at the banks that are all busted where their money has gone. I was talking to a relative yesterday who's worked with the same company loyally since he left college, age 22. His pension, he knows that he cannot live on it. That's a private pension from a life in activity with the same company. It's a multinational legend. The CEOs are all involved in the frauds that we talk about. But the staff at the companies who have dedicated their entire life to that company cannot live on the pension it gives them. They need to think about defrauding students in university towns by buying a flat with their lump sum. That's the only way that they can get by.
Why do you think people, the top leaders, are all invited to go to the Bilderberg conferences? I don't want to go down that avenue, George. I don't want to go down to this mass conspiracy theory. All I'm trying to show you and the general public, wherever your videos, whoever it reaches, is there is a very simple method of understanding billion-pound organised crime and money laundering. It's to look a little deeper into these corporate boiler rooms, which are nothing more than vehicles to transient hundreds of billions of pounds in and out of dormant shell companies.
Yeah, which is how Rupert Murdoch got started. Rupert Murdoch got started on the funds from the busted Nugan Hand Bank, with help from Prime Minister Gough Whitlam in Australia, and with the implicit knowledge of President Ford in the USA, that the CIA were giving him his US citizenship. But before he took all of that up, he dismembered the whole of Britain's free press and their capacity to produce high quality print runs in Fleet Street and in Wapping. Can you remember the massive industrial disputes around those issues? And what the quizzling news editors at the local papers think they're doing now is really smart. They're just replaying the same set of circumstances and the same set of massive job losses for their employees that write about marriages, births and deaths. That's what the papers are about. They're not about revelations. They're about local rituals and sport and celebrations.
It's to pacify the general populace.
The sheeples, yeah, the people that were watching them.
You call them sheeples. What I call them is, you know, they're sadly misinformed as to reality. Now, with William Jefferson Hague resigning from the government, what you have is, look a little deeper into his wife. He's a self-confessed homosexual, I believe, or you.
I don't want to go the homosexual or the paedophilia route.
All right,
keep talking about his financial crimes.
His wife is Fionn Hay.
Yeah, I know. We talked about this at length yesterday.
Yes.
Already understand that. His sister's involved, I believe, with the Prince's Trust.
That's correct. But Ian Roderick Gowrie Smith operates out of Talisman House. And Talisman House, 163 Holborn Street, is an interconnected boiler room to 50 Lothian Road, Festival Square, Aberdeen, Scotland.
Yeah.
Now, anybody with an ounce of grey matter in that skull area can look at that and then ask their local politician, how is it that Alex Salmond is preparing to have a consensus vote on whether Scotland should be independent? They're extracting the urine. I will maintain.
So I've already told you that I've asked in political meetings, in the public presence, the 50 Lothian Road question of my MP Michael Moore,
yes,
who's better off together,
yes,
and my MSP John Lamont, who's better off together and is planning a switch to Westminster if Salmond.
The reason why they're saying we are better off together is because they will expose the skullduggery, the £1 trillion fraud, money laundering, theft rings in these two bloody major bodies.
They will not expose that. Only we will expose that. They know that, and they're in a state of panic now about the videos that we're making.
Because they want the same common links to the boiler rooms operated out of Westminster that are fronted by William Jefferson Hague and David Cameron's mates. Because David Cameron, his family are hedge fund managers.
And the Cairn director on the court of the Bank of England with Dave Prentice, the union leader.
And so if you want to rob the Bank of England, all you need to do is control it. And when you, instead of printing hundreds of billions of pounds more, all they're doing is topping up the piggy bank so that these shitheads can rob it again. And that's what they've been doing.
So what they're advocates for is hyperinflation and stealing from the people. All sides, all political parties of every persuasion, including UKIP with the hedge fund manager at the top of that organisation. It is vicious, and the only way it will come out is by people talking about what we're talking about in this interview. And it's happening now all across the globe. Remember that next week we're interviewed in America by The Real Deal by Jim Fetzer, the investigative journalist. We are going live. We've already got contacts in Japan, and they know it, which is why they're in a state of panic. Can we stop now and maybe get John Patterson in, and then I'll let you walk the dog?
Okie dokie.
Thank you for that.